Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Hope things are going well. Call the meeting to order. And Alex, do you want to call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you and good morning. Ms. Eberhardt.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. League for Secretary Chaudhry.
Present.
Secretary Flora is absent. Superintendent Chaudhry is absent. Mr. Derenberg.
Here.
Present. Senator Lawla.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Gibbons is absent. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Any revisions to our agenda?
No revisions. Thank you.
We do have a public comment.
Yes, we have one public comment. Mr. Joseph Yakuta of the Climate Parents of Prince George's County. Welcome, Mr. Yakuta. You can turn on your camera and microphone. Very good.
Okay.
Welcome.
Okay. Am I ready?
Yes, please
sir.
go ahead.
And you can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for considering our testimony today concerning the need to adopt regulations in accordance with Maryland Education Code 5, Section 5319, as it was adopted in 2018 through HB 1783. My name is Joseph Yakuta, and I'm the lead volunteer for the Climate Parents Campaign of Prince George's. We are campaigning to reduce climate change causing pollution in our schools, and we are active in Prince George's County. In particular, we work directly with the Board of Ed in Prince George's to develop a climate action plan for the school system. During the General Assembly session, as we reviewed proposed legislation that concerns solar installation in public schools, we discovered a requirement for the IAC to adopt regulations requiring LEAs to analyze installing solar on new buildings and major renovations. As it currently stands, this provision does not appear to have been implemented. We examined the section of COMAR for IAC and for DAGS, and there are no specific requirements or regulations to look at solar. Also does not appear in the GGS procedure manual, as far as we can tell. While we understand that there are oversights, this is an important provision to implement, and we believe now is the opportune time to fix this. During the 2023 session, HB 458 was passed and requires IAC coordination with DGS to develop life cycle cost analysis. It places requirements on looking at analysis of alternate HVAC systems, and the statutory requirements are similarly worded to the ones for the solar ones in 5319. Given that the IAC is required to undertake this effort soon, assuming it isn't vetoed by the governor, it would be an opportune time to implement 5319 as well. There are also financial reasons to act. First, solar has come down in price substantially in the last decade. Secondly, there are numerous government incentives that have opened up, including the installation tax credit, which due to the passage of the IRA is now open to governments. There are also incentives in the Climate Solutions Now Act for schools to receive an additional 5% if they are built net zero, which is essentially impossible to achieve without solar. And there are numerous grants from programs in the DOE, EPA, MEA, and others. Finally, there are innovative financial mechanisms such as PPAs, community solar, that become commonplace now, and the higher upfront costs can be alleviated. We would be shocked if LEAs, after properly evaluating all these factors, did not determine it would be less expensive to put solar on upfront. The time is now. The ISC must act to implement the regulations directed by the General Assembly, ensure our state schools construction is being undertaken with full advantage of tax credits, grants, and other funds that come from clean energy. We'll also submit this in written form with more details and provide them to the sponsors of the bills as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Yakuta, for joining us. Alex, you want to make any comments or hold your thoughts?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Yakuta, and for your group's engagement on these issues. The IC is moving forward to implement and coordination with all the other state agencies around the climate change requirements laid out in the recent Climate Solutions Now Act, as well as other statutes recently enacted. And we are looking forward to pushing forward with all of the LEAs around net zero, of which we are able to support now with a 5% state share increase, as well as solar for other projects in school facilities. So this is all part of a larger movement forward, and the IAC is fully on board with that set of actions. So thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you.
Questions from commission members? Mr. Yakuta. Well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your comments. Have a good day. Okay, Executive Director's report, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the Commission. Today's recommended allocations of over $500 million in new appropriations is a historic CIP because it is the largest CIP in inflation-adjusted dollars in the last 10 years. And when we add in the additional set of $150 million plus in prior year appropriations that were waiting to be allocated, the total recommended this year for allocation is nearly $660 million to our school districts. I appreciate tremendously the General Assembly's support for the school construction programs of Maryland school districts and the many public pre-K-12 students that they serve. This historic investment by the state's taxpayers will result in very meaningful improvements in students' learning environments and teachers' work environments, and will produce significant value for communities across the state for many years to come. Next, I'd like to provide a quick update on stakeholder outreach activities. As you have said before, the Commission prioritizes outreach to LEAs and other stakeholders so that the IAC can ongoingly hear the perspectives of the LEAs and keep LEAs informed about developments and opportunities at the state level. This month and next month, I will have met with the superintendents and in some cases, school board leadership of at least 9 of Maryland's 24 districts. Staff and I are holding regional meetings with Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties in May, and another with Calvert, Charles, and St. Mary's counties in June. I'll also be visiting Dorchester. And I recently visited Howard and Prince George's counties. My first objective in these meetings is to listen, to hear and understand the challenges and obstacles that our LEAs face, and to learn what the IAC can do to best assist the LEAs. And what we learn in these visits will inform our future policy recommendations to you, just as recent conversations with LEAs prompted the development of the policy you'll be considering later in today's meeting to enable state investments in leased facilities. Next, I'd like to give you a quick update on IAC staffing, including retention and recruitment efforts. As you know, the IAC has been fortunate to be granted a number of new positions over the past 2 years with which to carry out the agency's expanded responsibilities under the 21st Century School Facilities Act. Like other state agencies, the IAC has struggled both pre-pandemic, but also even more so post-pandemic, to retain existing staff members and recruit new staff members to fill vacancies. The primary driver of this has been the state salaries being significantly lower than those being offered by local governments, and especially private sector employers. In just the last year, a number of staff have left the IAC for comparable positions elsewhere that pay as much as $25,000 a year more than we do. One of these individuals told me that they would love to continue working at the IAC but could not afford to. On the recruitment side, we have repeatedly posted positions only to receive but a few qualified applicants. To improve this situation, Deputy Director Cassandra Viscara and I are working with the Department of Budget and Management to obtain support for some measures designed to retain staff members whose skills, experience, and effectiveness are highly valuable and valued by the IAC, and to attract more qualified candidates for our remaining vacancies. In the meantime, we've renamed some positions to better attract qualified candidates, and we've extended where we advertise our vacancies. These steps have helped us already, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the IAC this month 3 new team members, Sean Vorsteg and Lisa Vaughn as Capital Projects Managers, and Daniel McBee as Maintenance Assessor. Also this month, 2 more candidates, one for our IT Systems Analyst position and another for a Facilities Assessor vacancy, have accepted our offers of employment and will start soon, one this month and the other in July. I will keep the Commission updated as we continue to work to retain and attract the best team members we can find and carry out the IAC's mission. Next, I'd like to briefly update you on the Blueprint Facilities Work Group. Yesterday, Melissa and I hosted the 6th of up to 12 planned meetings of the work group. We obtained very useful input from LEA and MSDE staff on what kinds of spaces our pre-K-12 school programs are using and expect to need to use in the coming years. We are also conducting significant analysis of available data on schools built over the past few years to identify trends and ranges in space usage. We are on schedule to providing a set of draft recommendations to the Commission at your August meeting. And finally, I reported last month that the General Assembly had passed House Bill 458, which will complete the establishment of the IAC as an independent unit of state government and streamline the agency's operations for greater efficiency and effectiveness. It's now on the governor's desk for signature. As soon as we're notified of a planned date for its signing, which could be as early as next Monday, I will let you know so that you may witness the signing if you desire. This concludes my report, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm also happy to proceed to the rest of our long agenda if that's the desire.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions for Alex on his report? Good report. Okay, let's move to the consent agenda.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Items 2A through E include administrative items, including last month's minutes, the new contracts, revisions to previously approved contracts, a property transfer, and pass-through grant approvals. Item 2E is the Built to Learn project status report, and we stand for questions on any of these items.
You'll hear a motion we approve of the consent agenda. Ms. Everhart, second. Mr. Derenberg,
Second.
any questions on the consent agenda? All in favor, say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Item F is informational only. Are there any questions about the Built to Learn project status? Okay, let's move to item 3, public school enrollment projections. Jamie and Al Sendera from the planning department. Want to take it away?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair Casemeyer, members of the commission. It's good to see you all. I'm before you to introduce item 3, an informational item on public school enrollment projections. Item 3 can be found on page 61 of the meeting agenda. Student enrollment is important to capital school construction because together with educational program, it defines the need or the demand for educational space. You don't have to be an educational facilities planner to walk into a school and know if the supply meets the demand. It's kind of simple. However, if it takes 5+ years to plan and design and construct a school facility, we need to project enrollment in order to know what the demand for educational space will be in 5+ years so that we can supply it, which is much less simple. But it is still mission critical for the state of Maryland and for all 24 LEAs in the state. Too little space in a school is not educationally sufficient, and too much, well, if capital school construction funds are constrained, then extra space for one school means that there will not be enough space for another school in the portfolio. And if operations, maintenance, and capital renewal funds are also constrained, then extra space for one school means that that school is less fiscally sustainable and the portfolio is less fiscally sustainable. This is the reason that enrollment projections are the first input in the formula that we use to determine the maximum state construction allocation for all capital school construction projects. Each year in late winter, the Maryland Department of Planning works to develop 10-year public school enrollment projections for each LEA, and then works with each LEA to reconcile the state's projections for the LEA with the LEA's projections for the LEA. Then LEAs allocate the reconciled LEA scale projections down to the school scale and use the school scale projections to inform their educational facilities master plans, which are completed in July, and to substantiate the school construction projects included in their capital improvement programs, which are submitted in October. Now, I would like to introduce Mr. Alfred Sendera, Manager of Projections and Manager of the State Data Center for the Maryland Department of Planning. In this position, Al manages the development of the 10-year public school enrollment projections for each LEA for the state. Al is a fantastic resource for the commission because Al knows enrollment projections and because he knows the stories that enrollment projections tell. I'd like to pass the mic to Al now so that he can share with you the enrollment projections for 2023 through 2032 and the stories that those enrollment projections tell. Al?
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to talk about Maryland's public school enrollment projections.
Thank you.
I have this projections presentation kind of in 3 segments. The first segment, I would like to talk about the historical trends of school enrollments. And the second part is on the projections methodology. And the last part is what the projections show. With that said, now on the first slide, after the intro,
Sorry about this, everybody. It seems a little jumpy. See if we can do a little bit better with this. You said, wow. Okay. Bear with me. We're going to reshare this. I'm sorry about this. I'm not exactly sure why the craziness, but we're going to get there.
all right.
All right. There
All
we
right.
go.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank
So-
you. Sorry about that.
No problem. So on this first slide here, we have historical public school enrollments for the last 10, 12 years. As you can see, from 2010 to 2019, there was a constant increase in public school enrollments. And in 2020, there was a sharp decline. This is basically due to COVID when everything was shut down. And that particular trend continued into 2021. And in 2022, the last school year's enrollment we have, that's the school year we are in right now, 2022-2023 school year. And there was a little increase in public school enrollments, little in the sense it's led to about 5,000 or so. So this is what's happening in the last few years. So what we did is we looked at why the sharp decline in enrollment. Is this people leaving public schools or what's going on? So we looked at the private school enrollments, which is on the next slide. I'm sorry.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, but if I know that it may be lower resolution, but it's possible we might also consider exporting to a PDF and showing it from a PDF if we need to.
Let's try one more time and do that.
Yeah, last resort. Thank you.
Or we can go this way. Yeah, just click on slide.
This is sufficient view.
All right.
So, slide 3, Jamie.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm going to have to export that.
Oh,
Yes, Secretary Flora, thank you. It is in your packet as a PDF if you also want to pull it up separately, but we're hoping to show it for the public on screen here. So we're going to reshare a fresh PDF here. Thank you for your patience and bearing with us.
There we go. Okay. Yep. So this slide is basically the information that was shown on the previous slide, but showing a difference or the increase in school enrollments each year, a change from previous year. So as I said before, from 2010 to 2019, there was a constant increase in public school enrollments. And after that, a sharp decline during the COVID period. And in the last year, a little bit of increase, about a little over 5,500. So on the next slide, I have some information that also looks at the private school enrollment. So this slide shows public school enrollments along with private school enrollments. The bars on the top, that's in the salmon or the pinkish color, show the numbers for private school enrollments, along with public school enrollments are the yellow color, gold color bars in the bottom. So as you can see in 2020, 2021, and 2022, there was a slight increase in private school enrollments. As a matter of fact, in 2022, the private school enrollments increase was more than what we had in public school enrollments. Relatively speaking, percentage-wise, it's a much higher increase in private school enrollments. Now, on the next slide, there's a other component. This is just a change slide showing the increase, decrease in school enrollments for public and private schools together. And the last year in 2022, public and private schools increased by about 11,700. Of that 11,700, 5,500 are for public schools. The remaining, about close to 6,000, are for private schools.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Do any of these represent homeschools?
Yes, on the next slide, we have some information on the homeschool data. So here, the blue bars at the top include homeschool children as well. If you look at 2020, the homeschool data shows about 42,000 children being homeschooled. That's the year of COVID. And before that year, it was only 27,000 children were homeschooled. So it's basically a shift from public school to homeschooling is what happened during COVID. So we saw a huge decline in public school enrollments, and we weren't really sure what happened, but this data lags by almost a year. We don't have the 2022 homeschooling data yet. That information is released at the end of the school year. So as you can see in 2020, that's 42,000. In 2021, also there was an increase in homeschool children. So that's about a couple of thousand, but still didn't come down. We are curious to see what is happening in 2022 school year. My bet would be a little decline in homeschooling children because we saw an increase about 11,000 children in private and public schools. So that might be the case. So,
I have a question.
To Darrenberg?
Go ahead.
The homeschool students, are they enrolled in public school or are they separate program?
They are not enrolled in public schools. They are not counted in public schools. They are people who are basically stay at home and are taught by their parents, or like a group of people, I guess, with several parents taking care of 3 or 4 children.
So with public school educational packages, or just on their own, or through a private company?
I can weigh in on this. Since we have oversight on this, is Superintendent Childers. So they have to provide notice that they're going to homeschool their child. So there's an official notice, and then they can sign up with vendors or do them themselves. Ultimately, they will need some kind of approved curricula because they're earning credits and they have to show that they're progressing, and they just then the school system receives just notification that their child is in a public homeschool setting, and this is how they're delivering the education to their child. And there's there's a market for it. There's software. There's all kinds of things, and then parents, whoever's at home taking care of the kid, or depending if they're an older child, it could look different. But ultimately, that's how it functions. But they're completely disenrolled. There's an official notice to the school system. The state must be informed, MSDE, and they can provide that educational learning through vendors as well, who have packets and everything else. And then, of course, it's self-driven and facilitated, or it could be synchronous and virtual, and they can have teachers that way as well. It can vary.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Al.
So these are the trends on historical school enrollments. So on the next slide, I have information on the methodology of how we do school enrollment projections. What we do is we look at the births that happened historically in Maryland and broken. We also look at the births for each jurisdiction, meaning the 23 counties and city of Baltimore independently. And we develop a ratio of the births to kindergarten enrollments. Like if there were like 100 births in 2010, how many of those births showed up in public school systems in 2015 for kindergarten 5 years later? So we develop a ratio historically, and this is what is applied to the births to derive the kindergarten enrollments. Similarly, we do the same methodology for first grade as well. So births that happened in 2010 that show up in public schools in 2016, 6 years later, where the child is eligible to be in first grade, we develop that ratio and apply that to the regression technique to derive the first grade enrollment. For the remaining grades 2 through 12, we use the grade succession ratio over a period of time. Grade succession ratio is looking at information of enrollments for, like, example, like how many children were in 5th grade and how many children ended up showing in 6th grade the following year. So we do an enrollment of 5th grade divided by enrollment in 6th grade, you get a ratio. We have this ratios going back all the way to 1970. So we don't use ratios that far back, but we use ratios in combination of 3 or 4 different years and apply that to the last year school enrollment to derive projections into the future. So that's the gist of the methodology. And like I mentioned, births play a key role in enrollments. So this slide shows the births that happened in Maryland for the last 10, 11 years, from 2010 to 2021. We do not have 2022 data yet. That hasn't been officially released. The 2021 data we have is from the CDC website. The state hasn't officially released their birth numbers yet for 2021. They still wait. But as you can see, like from 2017 on, births in Maryland have been declining. If you have lower births, this tends to have lower school enrollments in the future. So,
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Secretary Flory, you have a question?
Yes, Al, how are we accounting for in-migration, population growth in the state? Because this is really accounting for existing population and projections related to births. So we know, as you and I have discussed, there's in-migration. So how are we accounting for that overall population?
Right.
So, from that source.
Yeah, the migration component is basically taken into consideration through the kindergarten to births ratio. Like, for example, I'll pick 2 counties, not to make it any county feel bad. But for example, Howard County, if they have 100 births in 2018, in 2022, 5 years later, 2023, they would have, historically in the past, they had more enrollments. Like, you had 100 births in 2010, but in 2015, the kindergarten enrollments was 120, something like that. So a 20% increase. So this 20% increase is basically due to migration, people moving into the county. On a similar note, for some counties, maybe Baltimore City would have 100 births in 2010, but the kindergarten enrollment is like 75 or 80. So they have a decline in births. That's the out migration. So that's how we track the component of migration in the school enrollments. So usually it's not 1:1. Not all births end up going to public schools. Again, like we have the components of private schools, right? But in some jurisdictions, the component of births to enrollments is a lot higher. So that's how we know that the people moving in and migration is accounted for.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So again,
Ms. Eberhardt, you had a question? You were muted.
Just a quick question. This trend for Maryland in the decrease of births, is that similar to the United States in general?
Yes, ma'am. We have looked at this a couple of years back, right before COVID. Since, like, if you go to the previous chart, Jamie, it's from 2017 on, like, see that start, like about a couple of thousand decline in 2017. So I wasn't sure if we were thinking there was a missing component of data. In 2018, that same thing happened. And by 2019, when we saw these declines, we kind of looked at what's going on, and we looked at the national births, and the national births also showed a decline. And there were several scholarly studies, which I might have shared with the IAC folks previously, which pointed out to the fact that people are tending to put off starting families into their 30s rather than in the late 20s like before, which has reduced the number of births that happened over a period of time. So if this trend continues, we will have lower births. But again, like we have this component of migration where people from foreign countries move in. We might be okay though.
Thank you.
So this chart shows historical births from going all the way back to 1940, 42. The reason why I wanted to show this is births tend to happen in cycles. Like during the baby boom period after the Second World War, like we had a big increase in births, and after that there were decline in births. So what I wanted to highlight is the births tend to go in cycles. Right now, if you see the last part of the gray line, which is the historical data, we are in a dip. But the gold bar we have are the projections. We are projecting a slight increase in births going into the future in the next 5 years also. So any questions on the historical births? Excuse me. This chart is a very interesting chart. This shows a picture of what's happening. I'll try to explain it clearly. It's a little hard to comprehend, but this shows the picture of what the historical projections will be like in the future. Each point on the graph shows a cumulative births for 13 years, meaning like if you pick, say, 2020, it shows births of 13 years going back from 2020 to 2015, and from 15 going back to 13 years. So 2015, 2010, 2002. So basically it shows in each year how many children are eligible to be in school systems. So if you look at this graph from 2010 or 2009, going all the way to 2017-18, that increase in that gray bar is a cumulative increase in births. So that kind of reflects on the historical school enrollments. We have seen an increase. And after that, this gray line and that's coming down, that's a cumulative births that are eligible to be in school systems are coming down. And the blue bar here on the graph are births that actually happen but are not yet in the school system. Like say a child that's born in 2018 will be eligible to be in the school system in 2023. We already know these births happen and how many children are eligible to be in schools by 2025. It's just that we will be getting there. And the yellow bar is the projections that we have included. The first point of the yellow bar, we only project 1 year, but we have data for 12 years already of the historical births that happen. Even for 2032, we have about 7 years of data that's already happened. We are only projecting 5 years of births for 2032. So we have a clear idea on the births that are eligible to be in the school system. So as you can see, it's kind of coming down and kind of flattening out. That's what our birth trends show, which gives us an idea of what school enrollments will be. But the other factor too is people moving into the state from out of the country or from other states. Then that might show a little differently with increase or decrease. So that's that graph. And using that information and the grade succession ratio I mentioned previously for projections, this is what we are projecting for the next 10 years. The projected data is shown in the yellow line. The first couple of years, we are showing an increase, and the middle period, we are showing a decline. As you have seen in the graph on the births, there was a sharp decline in births during the period of COVID and right before that. That basically has an impact on the school enrollment as a whole. And I believe this might be the last chart or the last one chart. And this shows each excuse me, public school enrollments for each year, how they are increasing or decreasing. As I mentioned previously, in 2025, overall public school enrollments will decline because of lower births that happened previously. And then slight increase based on the projections we have. So these are yearly change in school enrollments for the next 10 years. And this chart basically shows the school enrollment change for the next 10 years from 2022 to 2032. And so we are projecting Anne Arundel County to have about 4,600 more students. Frederick County with about 3,600 more students. Baltimore City, we are projecting they will lose about 6,600 students in the next 10 years. So as you can see, the bigger counties have more increase, the Harvard, counties and whatnot. So that's the gist of it. I would be happy to answer any questions regarding.
Thank you, Al. Thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Sure.
Any questions for Al? This was just for information only. We don't need to vote, but thank you for putting these numbers together, Al. It's very informative. We appreciate it. Okay, let's move to number 4, priority funding area waiver, Calvert County Public Schools, Northern Middle School. Gene?
Good morning, Chair Casemeyer and members of the Commission. IAC staff received a priority funding area waiver request from Calvert County Public Schools on April 6, 2023. COMAR 14.39.02.03C requires that when an LEA proposes to build a new school or to increase the state-rated capacity of a replacement school outside of a PFA, the LEA shall request a waiver for approval of planning and funding. The Northern Middle School project will replace the existing facility, is outside of a PFA, and will also increase the state-rated capacity. The IAC designees met on April 11, 2023 to evaluate the request, taking into consideration factors detailed in COMAR. Notable factors include the rural setting that is not currently served by public water and sewer, the co-location of the existing Northern Middle School on the same site as Northern High School, and the substantial state and local investments towards the Northern High School replacement project and the new wastewater treatment plant, which was designed to handle the capacity of both the middle and high schools. The Northern High School replacement project was approved for a PFA waiver at the IAC meeting on February 23, 2012 as well. In consideration of these factors, the IAC designees recommend approval of the PFA waiver for Northern Middle School. I can now stand for questions or read the motion.
Oh, thank you. You want to read the motion first? Go ahead.
Yes. To approve the priority funding area waiver request for Calvert County Public Schools Northern Middle School replacement project.
Would someone like to make that motion so we can discuss it? Ms. Eberhardt, second by Mr. Derenberg. Any questions for Gene about the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Gene.
You're welcome, Mr. Chair.
Okay, number 5, maximum state allocation increase request, Baltimore City Public Schools. Gene?
Yes. On March 20th, 2023, IAC staff received a request from city schools to increase funding for the fiscal year 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund, Cecil Elementary number 7 Windows Door Project, and for the William Paca Elementary School number 83 roof replacement project due to bids that came in above the estimated project budget. City Schools reports that the bid increases are due to the instability in construction market costs and lead times within the current construction market. To address the increase in the project budgets, the LEA has revised their fiscal year 2024 CIP and submitted funding requests for these projects. Staff recommend approval of the LEA's request. I can now stand for questions or read the motion.
Want to read the motion?
Yes, to approve increases to the maximum state allocations for Baltimore City Schools, Cecil Elementary School number 7, window door project from $290,400 to $961,236, and William Paca Elementary School number 83 roof project from $739,200 to $1,575,206.
Someone like to make that motion, please? Ms. Eberhardt, second by Ms. Law. Any discussion or questions on this motion? Courtney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on the estimates. How old were the estimates for both of those projects? Do we know?
With them being fiscal year 2022 projects.
21, probably 2021, somewhere in there?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Curious. just curious because that's, the one is doubled and the other one's tripled almost, I guess. Is there, and this is something I can follow up offline, I guess, on as well. Just, do we update the estimates before we go out to bid, things like that?
So typically when funding is provided, it is locked in with the COMAR mechanism for an increased request. It does provide the LEA an opportunity to formally request the additional funds to which we would present at these meetings. These projects were both recently bid and the pricing is reflective of current market conditions.
You're on mute, Courtney.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. I'm painfully aware of the current market conditions impact to pricing. So just curiosity on my part. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Secretary Flora.
Yes, if you could just confirm, I would hope this is the case, but if you could confirm for the window and door, the spec related to that in terms of the high efficiency levels, because every retrofit, everything that we do has to be moving us closer to our climate goals. And so what are we currently utilizing in terms of specs as it relates specifically to something like windows and doors, which we don't replace very often. Those have a long life. So that's the first part of the question. And then secondly, as it relates to the roof, are we using high reflectivity on roofs to once again reduce overall energy costs for the building? So if you could just kind of describe those specs, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So each of these projects for state supported projects will go through Department of General Services technical review. For roof and window projects, that typically is inclusive of a construction document review to which, if there are any comments, they will be provided. For current window systems, they will be most often insulated glazing units with a thermal break for energy efficiency, and that would most likely be included for the window project. For the roof project, the William Paca will be replaced with a TPO roof, and those quite often have a white material that is reflective installed. They also come with, I think the 2018 International Building Code requires R30 insulation value to be replaced as well for these new roof projects.
Great, thank you. Good to hear.
You're welcome.
Ehrenberg, do you have a question?
They were already answered.
Oh, okay. Any other questions for Gene? All in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move to item 6, FY 2024 100% Capital Improvement Program. Arabia.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Joining me today is Melissa Wilfong, the IAC's Capital Projects Supervisor. Melissa is available to respond to questions regarding project scopes. But before I begin, it is important to note that the amount of funding available this year to address local school construction needs is unprecedented. Per the Maryland Consolidated Capital Loan of 2022, a total of $484.9 million in general and special funds and $40 million in supplemental enrollment growth and relocatable classroom EGRC funds is appropriated to support the FY 2024 public school construction program. On an annual basis, the Interagency Commission on School Construction approves capital improvement budget requests. The approvals are required to occur in December, February, and with the final round of approvals in May. For fiscal year 2024, the IC received 40 requests for planning and 243 requests for funding, totaling $982 million. The amount of funding requested by the LEAs and endorsed by staff has varied over the last 8 months due to withdrawal of project submissions as well as the resubmission of new requests by local authorities. The IAC's capital project experts determine eligibility of projects in relation to the state's current and future funding obligations, the LEA's preventive maintenance efforts, the total cost of ownership, at other school facilities in each jurisdiction, project scope evaluations, enrollment needs, and companion schools in close proximity, and the level of design progress that was accomplished. A list of project details that may be of interest is documented on pages 83 and 84. If you would, please turn to page 85, and I will walk you through the summary of project recommendations. Columns A through E includes the local education agency, the target allocation based on the LEA's 10-year average and enrollments, total requests for FY24, the total number of planning and funding requests recommended. Columns F and G represent the amount of new authorization and the IAC approved at the 75% and 90% cycles, which includes funding being held in the statewide reserve account to provide design funding to address pre-K to kindergarten needs and projects that came in over budget. Column H provides a detailed accounting of the new authorization being recommended today, which accounts for LEAs that were previously well below their target allocations. Funding included in this column also captures funds held in reserve for the Department of General Services consulting fees and to replenish the emergency fund account. Column I is the total amount of new authorization determined to be eligible to support projects reviewed by the IAC's technical experts. Columns K and J account for prior year new authorization and enrollment growth and relocatable classroom allocation recommendations totaling $151.7 million. As background, a county is eligible for enrollment growth and relocatable classroom funding when the enrollment growth is 150% above the 5-year statewide average, or 250 relocatable classrooms are in use based on the 5-year statewide average. Column L represents the funding recommended through the FY24 EGRC initiative. Of the $40 million appropriated, $12.8 million remains available for future distribution to eligible local education agencies. These funds have not been allocated because all eligible funding requests are shown as being funded up to their maximum state construction costs. The final column equates to the total recommended allocations available for distribution through the various funding sources. In conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the final FY 2024 CIP recommendations. Again, Melissa and I are available for questions, and I can read the motion. The motion is to approve the fiscal year 2024 capital improvement program as presented in the total amount of $663,928,487, including $6,658,984,758 for allocation to funding requests, $500,000 for the Department of General Services, design consultant fees, and reserving $4,082,129 in new authorization for design planning services and anticipated project cost, and to authorize the IAC staff to make minor adjustments to allocations based on calculation of the project's net state funding amount to avoid the over or underfunding of a project.
Thank you, Arabia.
You're welcome.
Would someone like to make that motion for discussion purposes?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Derenberg, second by Ms. Law. Questions? Alex, you want to make any comments about the number of $660 million?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this CIP, as I mentioned and as Arabia noted earlier, is unprecedented in the last decade in terms of size. And with that came a huge amount of work, both by the LEAs to formulate the projects in short time frame to bring to the IAC, and by IAC staff and partner agency staff to review this large number of project requests. My hat is off to all involved for moving this large number of over 200 projects for evaluation and to arrive at this significant significant investment in our state school facilities. We are geared up to do follow up on these and similar evaluations over the summer. EFMPs will be coming in from the school districts in July. So we will be reviewing the facility master plans and the additional plans that will guide them in their next year's CIP. And so this is by no means the end to a process. It's simply one of the biggest, most consequential years we've had in some time. And of course, the Built to Learn program continues alongside the CIP, of which we have still about 600,000 in funds to allocate to projects over the next hopefully
600,000 or 600 million?
600 million, pardon me. Thank you. This is the culmination of a lot of work, and I thank everyone for their contributions and efforts in this.
Thank you. Any questions for Arabia or Melissa? I have one question, and not that I'm questioning, I'm just curious. Oh, Ms. Everhart, go ahead.
I don't think you can answer, but we've been seeing like 20% increase in capital cost in the past year or two, with expecting that should continue. But these bids come in at today's market rate. Do we have any plan of, are we going to see all of these coming back to us in the next several years because we've got, outdated numbers now? Is there any way to, if I'm doing something in my house and I, think, oh, I'm going to do it next year, but that's going to cost me so much more, squirrel away a little bit more money to do that? How are we dealing with this unprecedented time of increasing in construction cost?
Thank you, Ms. Eberhardt, for that question, Mr. Chair. Yes, first thing is that the IAC is monitoring the developments with our partner agencies in market conditions and construction costs. We do not expect, or essentially what we are finding in all the industry sources that we have consulted, is that the cost increase rate of the last year and a half or 2 years is not expected to continue indefinitely. It is expected to come down. However, there will be some increases. And the best way that we have to deal with that is to continue to use our or the IAC's discretion to grant on a project by project basis increases to state allocations as justified by specific bid data and costs coming in on projects. The dollars that would fund those increases can come from the coming CIP years. We would not be able to accurately predict or project, because of the widely varying nature of construction projects, what the cost increases might be for any given project. So we must wait to see what they actually end up being before we can grant additional funds to project. But we certainly have, the IAC has the ability to do that, and the LEAs can come to the IAC at any time to ask for an increase when needed. We are certainly taking into account the likelihood that there will be cost increases on some projects, or maybe even many. And we're currently in the process, staff is in the process of consulting the LEAs for all of the actual costs for the projects being conducted over the last year, so that we can adjust the official IAC cost per square foot in the next couple of months. So that will be coming to you, and you will see what the increase over the last few months across the state has been.
What was our square foot number last year, or the one that's in effect now?
Yes, $385 per square feet,
Okay.
per square foot for a building only.
Mr.
458 for a site.
A question about Delaney. They request money and we did not fund it, or?
Well, we're not at the point of actually funding construction. The request does not come for construction. This is just for planning and the initial steps forward for that. For Delaney in Baltimore County, the stage we're at now is approving we have approved the feasibility study and supported the replacement approach requested by Baltimore County and given an initial, which is preliminary, estimate of state participation for the project. That certainly can change and is almost guaranteed to change when Baltimore County submits a request in the coming year or so for construction funding allocation, and that would take into account and adjust for any changes in projected enrollment for the school, as well as cost per square foot for the project, depending on what the IAC has adopted, likely in July, and any other changes to the project scope.
I had a question, Arabia. Just curious.
Yes.
In column H,
Mm-hmm.
Cecil County, $16 million. What was it? Why did that happen? What's that all about?
In column H, okay.
Yeah.
They have a project, the Northeast Middle High School project, and they needed at least $40 million to move that project forward, and it's very important to the school system. So
I got you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Arabia.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to item 7, FY 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund Extension Request. Gene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. IAC staff have received numerous requests in the past months to extend deadlines for the fiscal year 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund program, citing increases in bid costs, reduced availability of contractors, and extended lead times as factors that require additional time to complete projects. Upon review of all requests received to date, IAC staff recommends this adjusted schedule in order to accommodate the current market conditions, allow LEAs to execute contracts and move projects forward, complete the project closeout process, and submit required documentation for final reimbursement. Staff recommend approval of these requested extensions. I can now stand for questions or read the motion.
I'll read the motion first, please.
Yes, to approve adjustments to the fiscal year 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund project schedule by extending the 1, encumbrance deadline from June 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. 2, expenditure deadline from October 3rd, 2023 to August 31st, 2025. And 3, last date to submit request for reimbursement from May 1st, 2024 to October 31st, 2025.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. Derenberg, seconded by Mr. League. Questions for Jean or Secretary Floor? Do you have your?
Yes. Hi.
Okay.
The deadline, the encumbrance deadline, really through the end of this year. Do we have a pretty good sense of where they are in their process to know if that's even adequate, knowing how long these things take? So are we pretty confident they can actually meet the end of December based on where they are in their process right now?
Yes, we have been discussing at an individual level with all LEAs that do have projects that were approaching this encumbrance deadline of June 1st. And in our reviews with them, we have had very active discussions to ensure that the December 31st date is appropriate.
Okay, so they're all well into the process and you've reviewed their project schedules. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye to the motion. Say aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Item 8. Built to Learn funding approval, Caroline Public Schools, North Carolina High School. Melissa's going to do that for us.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commission. Just as a reminder, the Built to Learn Act authorizes Maryland Stadium Authority to sell bonds for school construction. We are currently working with an estimate provided from MSA last year of available bond proceeds of $1.7 billion. The project today is the Caroline County is requesting approval of $4,802,284 to fund a roof replacement for the North Carroll High School. This is a roof replacement of about a little over 100,000 square feet of the existing roof as a phase 1 to be completed this summer. The remaining 75,000 square feet is planned to be replaced next summer, and they'll be requesting FY25 funding for that phase 2 project. You can read the motion to approve the Build to Learn funding request for Carroll County Public Schools for the Caroline County Public Schools for the North Caroline High School for a roof replacement project totaling $4,802,284.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. League, and second by Mr. Eberhardt. Any questions on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9. Thank you, Melissa. I'm sorry. FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program Amendment, Prince George's County Public Schools, Charles H. Flowers High School, Arabia.
Yes, Prince George's County Public Schools is requesting approval to amend their FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program, Charles H. Flowers HVAC Roof Project by increasing the state allocation from $8,141,000 to $12.483 million through the application of $4.3 million from the county's reserve funds. Approval of this request will fulfill the state's commitment to fully fund this project. I have Jean available to respond to project-related questions, but I'll read the motion, which is to amend the FY 2023 CIP allocation for the Prince George's County Public Schools Charles H. Flowers High School HVAC Roof Project by applying $4,341,179 from the LEA's reserve account.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. Derenberg, second by Ms. Eberhardt. Any questions for Arabia about this motion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, just say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 10, FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program Project Rescission, Montgomery County Public Schools, Silver Spring International Middle School, Arabia.
Yes, Montgomery County is seeking IAC approval to rescind planning approval granted in the fiscal year 2023 Capital Improvement Program for the Silver Spring International Middle School Addition Project. After reconsideration on the part of the LEA, it was determined that the most appropriate funding source to achieve the state's maximum participation would be through the Build to Learn program, which does not require planning support from the state. If the IAC consents to the LEA's request, the state's future CIP funding obligation will decrease by $2.8 million. IAC staff support the LEA's request and recommend approval. The motion is to approve the rescission of the fiscal year 2023 Capital Improvement Program local planning approval of the Montgomery County Public Schools Silver Spring International Middle School Addition.
Well, your motion to that effect. Ms. Eberhardt and Mr. League, Courtney seconds. Any questions or discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you.
Abstain.
Secretary Flora abstain. I'm sorry. Item 11 is something that Alex and his staff have spent a lot of time on. A policy to allow the use of bond proceeds for capital improvements in leased public school buildings. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission members, at your January meeting this year, I reported to you that at least 3 LEAs had expressed a need to, in the near future, obtain the use of leased facilities in order to deliver all the educational programs and services required by the blueprint. And there's an overwhelming likelihood that such leased facilities will require some capital improvements in order to be suitable for educational uses. These LEAs and others will struggle to afford those and other capital needs without some state assistance. In that January meeting, you accordingly directed IAC staff to develop a policy to enable the allocation of state bond proceeds to capital improvement projects in leased facilities that are not owned by an LEA. Staff accordingly developed the proposed policy provided in this item found on page 106 of your agenda. The policy would make capital improvement projects in non-LEA owned leased facilities eligible for IAC allocation of state bond proceeds so long as the stated criteria are satisfied. These criteria include a minimum 25-year lease duration and, in the case of a facility leased by a charter school operator, a written guarantee by the LEA that granted the charter. The policy would require the LEA to repay a prorated amount of the state allocation if the leased facility were to cease for more than a 24-month period to be used for a public school purpose during that 25-year period after project closeout. State bond proceeds, of course, may not be used for operating costs, such as rent payments, utility costs, or salaries. IAC staff recommend the adoption of this policy as presented, as there are at least 2 LEAs who have expressed an intention to lease facilities in the coming year that may benefit from capital allocations that they could request this October in their FY 2025 CIP requests. I'm happy to stand for questions or to read the motion.
Read the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this motion will include a slight change to the wording. So I will read it as proposed amended, and that is to adopt the policy as set forth in this item and to direct staff to make appropriate changes to the IAC's Administrative Procedures Guide in accordance with this adopted policy.
Do I hear a motion to support to that effect? Mr. Derenberg, second by Ms. Eberhardt. Discussion, questions. Secretary Flora. You're on mute.
Yeah. So 25-year lease, that seems, I mean, based on the school projections and trying to really understand, I guess I'd like to understand, I mean, I understand tenant fit out and longevity of that capital investment. So that's not the issue for me, I guess, so much as the 25 years and the potential correlation against the school projections. Can you kind of just expand on that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Secretary. The requirement for the 25-year lease duration is recommended because of the lifespan of the capital improvements that will result from this funding. And as we have for many years had in place policies in the IAC and for the state where state bond proceed investments in any facilities that are run by school districts have to be recouped through value to the educational purposes for that time frame. And so if an LEA excesses or surpluses a facility that it's had with state investment, the LEA has to repay any outstanding state bond debt. This is essentially a parallel requirement, and it is in line with the requirements for use of state bond proceeds by other state agencies such as DNR for other facilities that they fund through similar grants. This is a policy that we have extensively vetted with our assistant attorney generals and bond counsel through the state treasurer's office. And this is the requirement that was best complies with their requirements for use of state bond funds. And it is backed up also by our analysis of the average lifespans of the components in the school facilities. The average lifespan is over 20 years. Mm-hmm. Obviously certain finishes last for fewer, but, foundations and other key structural things can last for 75, 100 years. So the 25 years is what we have calculated will ensure that the state receives the full value of its investment for educational purposes and outcomes.
Right. And I thank you. Just as a quick add-on to that, are there any parameters? Because as I'm looking at the background, that this is in response to full day kindergarten and career and technical education. Are there any parameters in lease agreements that have provisions that those improvements be specific to those types of needs that have been identified through the blueprint?
So that's not something that we can specify up front, but rather will be looked at very carefully in detail in any request coming to the IAC for a project. Okay. Just as we only fund, the state only participates in eligible components of school construction generally. Same thing here. It would only be for appropriate components of planned projects. And specifically for the uses noted, like pre-K expansion and career technical, those things are looked at very carefully by all of our interagency partners, such that we'll be certain that these dollars are going to the right functions.
Okay, and lastly, sorry.
No, happy to
is the location. So we work very closely in terms of PFAs and areas of where our schools are. I mean, to what extent will we weigh in on where these leased facilities are located? If you could describe that.
Absolutely. Great question. Currently, all school construction projects that are state funded are handled for PFA review under existing COMAR, and those regulations will apply to these projects just the same. Yes, absolutely. No difference.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Derenberg.
Currently, do we know how many LEAs use these facilities right now?
That is not something we've collected data on to date. It hasn't been many, but there are IAC records on some leases over time. But right now, it's really the blueprint requirements that are increasing some of the facility space requirements for certain districts where there may not be suitable land available for purchase. And in those situations, leasing may be the only way that a school district can get the space it needs.
I had a question. So for the most part, this will be utilized by LEAs to provide the space they need. But I mean, so this also makes or allows charter schools to use this process?
It does, through the LEAs.
But my question is a charter school, is this going to make it more difficult for a charter school to commit to 25 years? I mean, the likelihood, they probably don't want to do that, I'm assuming. So it would kind of discourage them from doing this, wouldn't it?
I don't want to try to speak for charter schools because I think they're so varied in their situations, both in terms of their long-term plans programmatically and also their facilities and capital plans. Charter schools do have opportunities to obtain funding for capital improvements through other mechanisms. But in the case of a charter school that is looking to make a capital improvement in a leased facility, it can work with its LEA that chartered it to take advantage of this policy.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Eberhardt?
Not just, it's not a question, it's a comment. Months ago, when we started talking about this, my concern was about charter schools and to ensure that there would be a policy to guarantee that the money would be repaid to the state. And I'm pleased to see that this seems to be a very fair way to be able to look at the charter schools.
Okay. Any last questions before we vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion regarding the lease of schools owned by LEAs, say aye or raise your hand. Okay, you anticipated me. Any opposed? Okay. Alex, is there anything else we need to talk about?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we've completed our agenda.
We hear a motion, we adjourn. Courtney, motion, Ms. Eberhardt seconds. See you next month. Thank you very much for